We're just like you.
Moi, je suis comme toi.
I'm just like you.
Merci.
I am just like you.
We are just like you. Soy como tú. I'm just like you.
I'm
just like you.
Hi, my name is Molly Korte, founder of Project Just Like You. I began Project Just Like You in 2016 after my son Jacob was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Because when I looked at Jacob, I saw a little boy. I saw him as any other child his age. And so I decided to start sharing stories. So that's what we are at Project Just Like You. We share stories and we talk about how everyone is more alike than different. Because I believe in my heart, when we focus on what we have in common, we see a person. We see a dignified individual. And I believe in this world, we need this more than ever, to see one another as people, as human beings, as equals. So tonight we have with us, our guest is Christina Tinker. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and our guest, Christina, is passionate about this message. This is a new topic for Project Just Like You, but it is an important one, as 1 out of every 5 Americans are affected by mental health. That is 18% of our population. Christina, again, this is one of the areas that she is very engaged in, and that she has no fear about diving into. We also would love to know where you're from tonight. So we have people from all over the country that follow Project Just Like You all over the world. So please let us know who you are and where you're from, and we will give you a shout out. We also want to give a shout out to Fiat Ministry Media, who produces our shows. You can check them out at fiatministry.tv. Also, do you enjoy watching Movement Monday? We have a wonderful audience base, and to keep this show running, we rely on your donations. We are a nonprofit, we are a 501c3, and we do rely on your donations to keep this show going. So you can please consider donating. Every little bit helps. You can find our donate button on Facebook itself. We are welcoming Christina Tinker again. She is a speaker, a children's book author, and podcaster who has coupled her passion for inspiring individuals to live in authentic and brave ways with her extensive corporate and entrepreneurial experience. She encourages business owners to embrace the gift of entrepreneurship with the skills that are needed to build a community and relationships that don't feel transactional. Most recently, she used her skills and talents to find Richmond Moms Blog, a nationally networked and locally focused parenting community. She has spoken to numerous organizations and continues to spread her message of hope throughout the Richmond area and beyond. And we are so thrilled to have her on our show tonight. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Molly. I'm just honored to be here and be part of this exciting movement. So thank you.
Well, thank you. We're so glad that you are part of this movement, and we're so glad to have you on here. So Christina, first off, before we even talk about any of these the topics tonight, you just had a big event this past weekend.
I did. I'm a little shocked that I'm still awake right now, because I feel like I should be.
Sounded to sleep.
Catching back up on my hours, but yeah, we had a beautiful day. Thank you so much for asking. It was our second annual Bloom event where we celebrate all things motherhood. So we had a total of 130 people in the Women's Hospital celebrating and just inviting mamas into this incredible community of motherhood, and it was great. So yeah, thanks.
That is fantastic. And Christina, you do this every year, don't you, with Richmond Moms Blog?
Yes. So this is we have two signature events. We have our birthday bash in the fall, and then we have this annual Bloom event celebrating all things motherhood every spring. So we'll be announcing our date for 2019 pretty soon, but it'll probably be late April.
Okay, late April of next year. So people in the Richmond area, if you're listening in tonight, check it out next year, especially if you are a new mom or you think you may be a new mom in the next year.
Yes.
I wish that I could have attended this year. Emma had her birthday on Saturday, and I was not even able to attend that because of the flu.
Oh, Molly. Wow, you have recovered amazingly.
Thank you.
Bless your heart. I know I've heard about this second wave of the flu going around.
Oh, it was awful. I mean, I was diagnosed on Thursday or Friday. I actually want to say it was Friday morning.
Okay.
And I just had felt so gross this past week. And I finally said, look, I think I have the flu. And Jacob was just diagnosed on Thursday.
Oh.
And
did you guys get some medicine and able to get through it?
We did. We got medicine. Thank goodness.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
But yeah, poor Jacob. He had strep, and he had the flu, and he had an ear infection. He was 3.
Wow, bless his heart. Oh my goodness gracious. I'm glad y'all are all feeling a little bit better. Yeah.
I wasn't going anywhere on Saturday.
Going nowhere. No, talk about staying in bed. Man.
My poor mom had to fill Emma's birthday party. So
oh my gosh. Well, you know what? She'll always remember that. Grandma was there running the show for that birthday.
I actually was so proud of my mom, Christina. It was a rock climbing party. They were at Peak Experience. I mean, that's what Emma would do. She went to rock climbing. And so my mom, amazing, like she's in her 70s, she climbed that rock wall all the way to the top. I saw video footage of
that is amazing. See, blessing in disguise.
Away.
Come on. I mean, that's gonna wow. They're both gonna remember that forever.
Exactly.
I love it.
I was so impressed by that.
Oh.
So, but I am so glad to hear that your Bloom event went well. I saw some of the pictures. It looked like a blast.
Thanks. It was really incredible. We just love getting, I did not have an easy arrival into the motherhood tribe. So it's really, that's kind of my main mission for why I founded Richmond Moms Blog, is to make the next mama's journey a little bit easier. So it's always a real blessing for me to have this event and see moms just feel included and not alone, and they can ask all the crazy questions that they want to ask. And it's just a really great event. So
that's fantastic. And I think, I'm not going to talk too long on this, but I think it is so important, Christina, you just hit on it. Motherhood can be a very lonely journey sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're past college, you're past all, when you're making all those friends,
right.
And, a lot of the times, it can feel very alone.
It sure can. Yeah.
And so the fact that you do this and you take that initiative to bring moms together and you to bring a tribe here in Richmond, I just love that. I love your work, and I love that you are so passionate about that. And
thanks. Thank you. Yeah.
Good stuff, Christina.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. We want to welcome Kelly, Reagan, Brian, and Irene here tonight. So thank you for joining us. And one of the things that we're going to be doing tonight is when you ask a question live, your name gets put into a drawing. Like, one lucky winner will win a copy of one of Christina's books. Oscar the Only.
Oscar the Only. Yes.
Oscar the Only.
Yes.
And so that's very exciting. So please, we encourage your questions, and we want you to be part of this discussion tonight. So Christina, you have your own personal journey with mental health, or with, with the topic of mental health.
Sure.
Tell us, it's such a personal story to share.
Mm-hmm.
We want to hear about why you're so passionate about this topic, Christina.
Sure, absolutely. Mental health is, I think, finally getting some much needed attention unfortunately, due to some of the tragedies that we've experienced in recent months and years, we're starting now to have this topic come up and bubble up to the top, if you will, because I think people are starting to understand just how broad it is. You said the number 1 in 5, that this is something that is affecting more and more people, and in particular our young people. And so my story is really one of mental health challenges that began in my youth, linked to family trauma. And that's also another common denominator that we see. But looking back at my family history, all of the women, going back as far as I know, because we don't have tons of records, but all of the women on my maternal side, and even to some extent on my paternal side, have had, their own challenges with things like anxiety, depression, perfectionism, OCD. And so in my teenage years, I was a dancer, and then my brother had a very traumatic car accident that resulted in a lengthy stay in hospital, and really put our entire family through, months and months of not knowing what was going on, and whether he was going to survive or not. I'm absolutely blessed to say that he did survive, had a miraculous recovery. He's a father and a husband, and has a beautiful story there to tell of his own. But because of sort of that perfect storm of being genetically predisposed, of having perfectionism going all the way back to my, really young, even in elementary stage, of just being very precise about the way things were. And so my real first diagnosis came with my eating disorder. And so that snowball that I just described turned into a decade-long battle with anorexia and bulimia. At the time that I was struggling, it was not necessarily confirmed in the clinical world or the clinical diagnosis, that this was a mental illness. Since that time, eating disorders have absolutely been classified as a mental illness. And there is great, a whole lot more understanding around, what the causes of eating disorders are, anorexia nervosa, bulimia, as well as binge eating, and that sort of thing. So I battled it longer than I would maybe like to have. But during that time, I also came to understand that anxiety, depression, perfectionism, these were all going to be things that I would have to deal with really for the rest of my life. And that there is no magic pill or, fast fix for mental illness. It's really about understanding who you are, understanding the chemistry of your brain, and that there's nothing wrong with you. There's just something a little different. And so that's really where my story began, and why I'm so passionate about it, because I see that this is increasing, and that it continues to carry a certain stigma, Molly, and that people are afraid to talk about it. Right. We also have breast cancer in my family. No one's afraid to talk about that. We'll talk about it all day long. Hey, I want my mammogram. I want my testing. Come on, let's make sure I don't end up with breast cancer. But I didn't know my grandmother struggled with anxiety and depression until I was in my 30s, and it was just over this random conversation that she shared with me. Oh yes, well, I was on Valium most of my young adult life. Why would that be the first time we heard about it, So I'm very passionate about helping to remove some of the stigma. Let's talk about this more openly, because we will feel less alone. And then we can start to really try and heal and seek solutions together.
Absolutely. I really respect that, Christina, because you're right. It is a subject that most people shy away from. And I have to say, even with Project Just Like You, it's ironic, because I started Project Just Like You to bring into focus how we are all more alike than different, and to raise awareness, obviously, and to raise acceptance.
Right.
And mental health is not something, I guess, because I just don't, I don't know how to, I feel like I kind of tiptoe around that subject.
Yeah,
like
sure.
most people with disabilities.
Sure.
And yet it's something that's so important, and it affects so many people. And I guess it's like I said, the irony there is that here I am saying we need to talk about disabilities. We need to bring it out into the open. And at the same time, I felt myself tiptoeing around like, well, how do I address this topic?
Yeah.
And so I love the fact that you are so open about this, Christina, and that you were so brave to share your story.
Well, thank you. Thank you. You know, Molly, one of the things that I always say, and I know that you've experienced this yourself as you began to share your story on a public platform as well. And, you know, it is my fundamental belief that when we tell the truth, we get to live in the light. And whether we feel, you know, we don't, I can't say once I recovered and I was living in recovery and, you know, really not having any more issues with my eating disorder throughout my 30s, I didn't assign, I wouldn't have acknowledged that I was still carrying shame around for that time. And I did fundamentally understand that it was not like I did something wrong. I didn't make a choice to, you know, have this eating disorder and struggle with the anxiety. But I've got to tell you that until I really stood up and started sharing the story on a public platform, I didn't understand that there was still a veil of shame. And there was something that I was still hiding, that I was always protecting that part and putting forth this image of, you know, the woman who's got it all together. And as soon as I started sharing it, I mean, every single place I speak, whether it's a professional, you know, organization, or it's a faith-based group, or it's a children's group, every single time, at least one person, and sometimes tens of people come up and say, me too, you know? And I think that's what's so magical, is that it's the moment that we sort of let somebody, you take a breath and you go, okay, I'm not the only one, and there's hope and there's light in this. So I know that that's what you've experienced with projects just like you and the work that you do in advocacy. And I do think that a lot of people tiptoe around this topic because it's uncomfortable, because there's not a solution, and because it's just, you know, unfortunately, it's something we'd like to say, not me, not me, not me.
Right. You know? Absolutely. I have goosebumps actually when you were telling that about how people respond.
Yeah.
It takes so much courage, I think, especially when it comes to the mental health, to share your story. Yeah. Because it's an invisible.
That's right.
You know, you can easily see someone in a wheelchair. You can easily see someone with Down syndrome. You can easily, you know, autism you can't really see, but you can see that in the certain characteristics that come out.
Sure.
But mental health is one where people can hide it. Yeah. And keep that under wraps. And the fact that you are encouraging others to share their stories, to be honest about who they are. And I love that you said, when you tell truth, you are in the light. And I 100% agree with that. Yeah. And, you know, and I think that goes to our next topic here, Christina, where we like to focus on authentic relationships. Like this is something that you're passionate about. Talk to us about, like, define that for us, Christina. What?
So I think an authentic relationship, and I will say right from the get-go here, so Dr. Brene Brown, who's a TED speaker, a PhD professor at University of Houston from my hometown, most of my work now and most of my understanding and the growth that I've done internally around authenticity and vulnerability and being brave and being courageous is a direct result of working through all of her material and her research over the last decade, really. And so, you know, when I think about an authentic relationship, I think about relationships where we can come to the table being fully and wholly exactly who we are, not having to apologize, not having to present it with some kind of bow wrapped around it, but just truly being able to show up in exactly who we are, where we are in that moment in time, and knowing that the person is going to see us and love us anyway, and that we can both give and take in that relationship without, you know, repercussion for any fault or any you know, flaws that might be revealed in that day. I think that when we can really see each other and look into each other's eyes, and as you said earlier, we see a human, you know, when we're able to look, and I call it God, you can call it the universe, you can call it whatever you want to call it, but when we can look into each other's eyes and see that dignity and see that common thread of humanity that connects us all, I think that's when authenticity is just lit and really creates magic in our world.
That's absolutely. I love that answer too. Yes, where you can look into each other's eyes and you can see a human being. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, Christina. And so,
including the mirror, by the way, including the mirror, because that's oftentimes where we struggle the most. You know what I mean? I always tell my kids, you get what you give in this world. And,
yes,
it's hard to give what you don't give to yourself. And I think especially as parents, we sometimes struggle with wanting to give our kids all of this courage and this bravery and this, and then do we have it? Do we give ourselves the same compassion? Do we give ourselves the same kindness that we're trying to teach our kids to give? So,
right.
It's got to start there.
We want to welcome right now Courtney, Paul, Robin, Karen, and the Nook. So we are
hello.
We are so glad that you guys have joined us tonight. Again, we are with Christina Tinker, who is the founder of Richmond Moms Blog and truth teller, storyteller. And we're focusing on mental health tonight because May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So yes, and again, we are encouraging your questions. So please ask your questions so we can be part of this discussion, and also with someone's name will be a lucky person. We're going to draw someone's name who will be a lucky winner tonight for Christina's books, Oscar the Only. So Christina, you also like to talk about personal story matters.
Mm-hmm.
And how to share that story. So what would you recommend for somebody who wants to share their story and not sure how to do it?
Sure. So, I think our stories, when they're shared appropriately and boldly and authentically, I think our stories have the capacity to change the world because of the things we've been talking about. The fact that we can be connected to each other, that we can see ourselves in someone else's story, and it sort of calls the next person up to be courageous and to share their story. So I think the first thing with anybody that wants to start sharing their story but isn't quite sure how is to really get clear on that story. What is the true story of you? And being able to boil that down to the essence of really what your what is your purpose? What is your mission? What is it that your story is doing for the greater good, for the sake of humanity, et cetera. So I think that's number one, is really getting clear on that and owning it. And in the work that I do individually with people to help them sort of distill their story and then begin sharing that, whether that's blogging, whether that's in a written book, on podcasts, on shows and things like this. The number one thing that I find is that people have gotten really clear on the shiny parts of their story, but they're very unclear on the tarnished parts. And oftentimes it's in the tarnished parts, of course, that our story carries some of its heaviest and most powerful, work that can be done. And so I think not being afraid to really share the whole story in that way, looking at both, the shiny and the tarnished, but along with that comes the flip side of understanding what appropriate boundaries are. I see some people, especially with, today's social media environment, I think some people, we begin to pour everything out on this very public platform. And then some people are hurt really badly and really quickly by the backlash that comes. And so I think understanding appropriate boundaries, people have to earn the right to know parts of our story. We need to still remember that we have to build trust, that we have to not put ourselves into situations that we're not really ready to face. So I know that's a little bit of a two sides, I guess, to that coin, but I see that very often with people saying, okay, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to tell this story. And then they start getting backlash because it was too much too soon, or more often than not, because they haven't actually developed a community that's earned the right to hear the whole story. And so I think about with the work that you're doing with Project Just Like You. I mean, it started with this beautiful community that you started building from the very beginning, and they've earned your trust, and they've earned the right to be part of knowing your family's story and hearing each other's stories. But they've done that by showing respect, by showing gratitude, and really appreciating the fact that people are showing up to the table. I think number one is think first about how you want to share your story. Are you building a community, whether that's an online virtual community, an in-person community? But we still need community that has a thread of trust, that has a thread of authenticity running through it, in order for us to share our stories in meaningful and powerful ways. And so I think once we get clear on that, figuring out what is your natural, are you more of a speaker? Do you tell your story better than you write your story? Mm-hmm. You should probably look at things like podcasting, getting in front of live audiences. In almost all communities, I know we're really lucky here, Molly, in Richmond, because we have a plethora of local communities that like in-person live communities, like Mindful Mornings. There's a new movement called #LoveYou that wants to hear these types of stories. But I know all communities have places where you can go and do that. So if you're more of a speaker in doing that, and if you say, oh my gosh, I'd rather do anything but speak, then thinking along the lines of blogging, writing, it's really incredible now with the self-publishing movement. It's frankly quite easy to write a book and self-publish it. And so that could be a great way to get started. But just getting in touch with all the parts of your story, writing it down, and then starting to figure out what your natural talents are in terms of sharing that story would be my recommendations.
Okay. I love also that you state that you have to earn respect in order to hear certain parts of the stories. Mm-hmm. And that's something I think a lot of us forget or don't know to begin with.
Yeah.
So it's good to hear that reminder of like, it's okay not to dive into everything. It's okay to only share bits and pieces. And as you get to know who you're talking to, then share the more intimate.
That's right.
Or more scary, however you want to label it.
That's right. That's right.
An excellent point, Christina.
Yeah. And the other thing along those lines, Molly, is that, there are times where you may speak to a group of 50 people or 500 people, and you may feel like, oh gosh, I don't know if it mattered. If just one person's life is changed in that audience, then it mattered and it was worthwhile, and I think that sometimes we also forget that because, again, we live in this curated, flashy social media world where it looks like everybody's doing astounding big things. And, I think oftentimes in the real work of advocacy and the real work of changing cultures and changing the world, it's one life, it's one family at a time. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's not, you have to put you talk about the word grit. You put a lot of grit into advocacy work. You get gems out of it.
Yeah.
But you really have to put your heart and soul into it.
Yeah.
To see that. So you're right. And then you talk about these awesome things on social media and be like, look at how awesome this is. And look at all the wonderful things they're doing with XYZ. But they're not talking about how they're pedaling their wheels behind the scenes to make it all happen.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. We see none of the blood, sweat, and tears,
That's right. Exactly.
Get there. And I think it's important to reveal that a little bit. So
that's right. Yeah. So Christina, we do have a question. Can you tell us about Oscar the Only?
Sure. Yes. So I wrote Oscar the Only. Actually, I wrote this book in like a single day. Truly, I did. Because we had our first child, Alex. And I was pretty convinced that he was going to be the only child. As I said in the beginning of this interview, I did not take to mothering as naturally as I had hoped I would. And I struggled with postpartum anxiety and depression, which when you have mental illness, you are much more likely to struggle with postpartum issues. So I struggled with that. And then it was just a hard transition. Being a perfectionist and having natural control needs and issues that I had dealt with for so long, it was not easy. So I kind of thought he would be our only child. And so around his preschool, once he was in preschool, around age 3, we started noticing that we got a lot of questions about that. And there were the natural ones, like when are you going to have another one? And all of, the stuff where people don't respect boundaries. But even then to him, Things like, oh, you're so independent, you must be an only child, or you're so this. And so that was kind of what sparked the idea, was to write a book to him, dedicated to him, that was about his experience. But then in his preschool class, there were 3 children in his class of only 12 kids that each had something very unique about them. And I watched over the course of that year as each child experienced the feeling of being the only one. And that as they started, forming these little relationships and friendships as 3 and 4-year-olds, the light bulb that went off when they saw, oh, I'm not the only one that feels lonely, or I'm not the only one that feels different, or I'm not the only one that feels left out. And so that's really the story of Oscar the Only, was this little boy who felt like he was the only child, and he was an only child, but then he realizes his friend Fiona at the end, that she also felt lonely in the world because of her differences. And so it's really a story about recognizing that we're more alike than we are different, that we're never alone, and that we can show compassion and love to each other and be on the journey together. So.
How sweet. I love that. Well, that's a perfect book for our audience.
Yeah.
For sure. That is great. So again, we're with Christina Tinker. She is the founder of Richmond Moms Blog. She's an author. She is a public speaker. And if you ask questions, then you have an opportunity tonight. One lucky winner will win her book. So please join in the discussion, and we're glad that you're here with us. So Christina, another thing that you touch on is balancing the grit and grace of womanhood and parenting. And can you just talk a little bit about that and what that means to you?
Sure.
I saw a few of your pictures. I love the picture. I still remember that one of the zoo where you took your daughter and you were talking about grit and grace with your daughter at the zoo. And
oh my gosh,
beautiful picture.
Yeah,
that was just like, yeah.
Oh man, that girl is all my grit right there. She helps me develop a really
I love it.
Really gritty experience of parenting. So this idea really came to me when I was thinking about this, how we present ourselves in the world as women, and how people expect us to present ourselves as women. And I think, a lot of people have said this is the year of the woman, and we've seen tons of public dialogue about, women's empowerment and women's voices getting much more amplified, and some focus that we need, et cetera. But I think what I also have seen with this move is this really, really, really strong, almost violently strong side of some women. And, that makes some people uncomfortable, and it makes us, that's not what we expected. There's a beautiful song that a friend of mine, Haley, turned me on to, and it's called, the chorus says, sit still, be pretty. And I don't know about you, Molly, but I know we're close to the same age. And I was raised by a really strong mother, and I never really felt that direct. I never felt like I was being told to just sit still and be pretty. I mean, I was always sort of encouraged to use my gifts and
absolutely. So was I. Yes.
Yeah. But I think even so, in general in the world, I do still think that there is an undercurrent of, well, but make sure you're nice about it, or don't get too outside of our expectation. And particularly, we're here in the South, so might be a little bit stronger. But when I think about this grit and grace, what it really means, grit for me is like the trudging through the mud and the muck and having the battle wounds to show for it. But the grace is that balance of coming through it and seeing the journey and seeing your own strength in those battle wounds, seeing what you've accomplished. And here's where the real magic comes in that moment of grace, when you're able to look back and see, okay, look at what I just did, and look at how powerful and strong and courageous I am, even though I have the wounds to show. Then we extend our hand out and we start to help and pull the next person along. That's the balance of grit and grace, is that we don't forget what it took for us to get to the other side, because we're always reaching back and helping the next person along on their journey. So that's what that means to me.
that none of us are in it alone.
Yeah.
If I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah. Yes.
That's a beautiful image.
Yeah. And that using our, the grit that we got from going through it is how we then, turn around and make that, maybe it was a tragedy, maybe it was something that we couldn't control, a struggle, but it makes it, that's where the value comes out of that, is that we reach back and we, now we're helping the next person along. It wasn't for naught,
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, that's a great point,
Mm-hmm.
because our experience in this life, whether it's good or whether it causes us pain, I really believe, going along with what you're saying, it's not here for ourselves. It's here to help others.
That's right.
It's here to serve one another.
That's right. Yeah.
And you can take that pain you're talking about and you can make something amazing out of it.
That's right. Yeah.
If you choose to.
Oh yeah.
It's all about choices.
Absolutely. And it's a daily choice,
It's a daily choice.
That's what's important. And I know, I'm familiar enough with some of the dialogue that happens, in the disability world sometimes. And people, I hear this often, right? I wouldn't change it for the world. I wouldn't change it for the world. And, in the eating disorder advocacy work and the mental health advocacy work that I do, I've heard people say similar things. And, very frankly, I've had that question asked. So would you change, your decade-long battle with eating disorders? And I would be lying if I said, no, I wouldn't change a thing. Yes, I would change it. I would not go back and do the exact same thing
for
12 years and struggle that way. And the devastation that it caused my family. I mean, I would not say that. Mm-hmm. But what I will say very boldly and without a doubt in my mind is that because it did last so long and because I did trudge through it and that struggle, I know how to help young girls who are struggling with that now. I know how to help mothers who are struggling with their children, in that place. And I'm willing to do it because I've been through it. So that's what I mean by that.
Sure. Yeah. And that takes a lot of bravery to reach out and say, yeah, like you said, you would never go back and do it again. But because of those experiences, you can now reach out and help others so they don't repeat the same mistakes, or they can talk about what's going on, their feelings. They can talk about the emotional trauma, whatever's going on with them.
Oh, yeah.
And separate that and be like, oh, okay, well,
yes,
I'm not in this alone. Or
that's right.
And I think that's
the perspective sometimes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We want to welcome Jennifer and Carolee, who also joined us. So thank you again. And Emily. So thank you again for being with us. And we are glad that you are sharing your evening with us tonight on Project Just Like You. Christina, is there anything tonight that I haven't talked about that you want to share with us, that you want to talk about?
Well, Molly, I think the last thing, and I alluded to this earlier, was just the fact that mental health and mental illness in particular, it is a growing challenge that we are seeing in our youth, not just here in America, but across the world. And I am recently a new board member of Beacon Tree Foundation, which is an organization here in Richmond that advocates for children's mental health, but also more specifically actually provides funding for families that perhaps need to have a psychological evaluation so that they can start to get some services for their child if they think that there is an emotional problem. Mm-hmm. And they even go so far as, at the very far end of that spectrum, if a child is suicidal and needing something like residential care to just keep them safe and keep them alive, Beacon Tree can actually step in and help do that. Mm. I would like to just talk about that. I know, and I know that this is something we probably won't get questions about because, again, it's a hard topic. Mm-hmm. But our young people are not dying by accident. They're not dying from disease. More than 50% of young people that die today are dying either by suicide or by homicide. Mm-hmm. So they're killing themselves or they're killing each other. And it's a direct result of mental illness. Mm-hmm. And so, that's what drives me to not be afraid to talk about this. I just don't have an option. I have 3 children. I have 3 children who absolutely are predisposed to struggle with mental illness in their life. So I have to stand up and talk about this and fight for this so that by the time they are young adults, we live in a culture that recognizes this the same way they would if that child was predisposed for, cancer or something like that, that we would do early intervention. We would give them services. We would see this as something that was part of all of our world, not just one person's world. So that's the only other thing that I wanted to bring up is that we need to be talking about this for our young people.
I totally agree. And, and I read an article recently that talked about that. It talked about how we are now, our numbers in life expectancy have gone down so much that we are now with third world country status, it said, as far as life expectancy. But it's not because we don't have the
healthcare.
And the healthcare, absolutely. It's because of this reason you're talking about, the suicide and homicide.
That's right.
And this is a huge problem. I mean, if we have gone down that much in our life expectancy, and this is a topic we cannot afford to ignore.
Nope.
Pretend that it's not going on, because clearly it's going on and it's affecting us now, and it's going to affect our future.
That's right.
If we don't rein it in, and if we don't figure out how to best address this.
That's right. But here's the best part about this is that how we address it is the work that you're doing with movements like Project Just Like You, the work that I'm doing in helping people to recognize their story, to share their story, to live more authentic, bold lives. That's how we do it, because our disconnected state of being is what is driving us to not see the dignity, to not see the humanity in each other, and ultimately to live isolated lives. People say what causes someone to go crazy, right? Ugly language to talk about it, but that's the language that people use.
Right.
Disconnection and isolation, number one.
And I think we live the more that we have the social media world, the more that we have liking someone's post is not a friendship. Right. That's a like. Right. That goes nowhere. But because of social media, we feel more connected. Yeah, I would say we are so much more isolated today.
That's right.
And all we see are people's feeds.
Yes.
And you see the bright spots in their lives, and we're not knowing what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
We're not hearing about their struggles.
Right.
We're not hearing about the pain. Yeah. But people are still feeling that pain.
That's right. And then feeling alone in that pain.
And feeling alone in that pain.
Right.
Not knowing who to turn to or where to turn to. And Christina, I think it's a huge, huge issue that we have. And I'm worried for my daughter's generation when they're older. I'm worried for your kids. I'm worried for all of our kids.
Yeah.
Because this is not, as you were saying, authentic. This is this is what we want people to see.
Yeah. But here's what's cool. Gen Z is already starting to change, what's the saying? Move the pendulum, right? Because we are hardwired for connection. That's a fact of being a human being. And so already we're seeing, in Scott's Edition in Richmond, Virginia is a great example of this. We're already seeing that generation is absolutely creating community. They are just craving. And what's interesting to me is they don't even know that they're craving it because they haven't had it. They just know that they have to have it, right? So go run around Scott's Edition. You're going to see all of these social coffee places that are being created, not just a typical coffee shop, but a coffee shop that is absolutely completely, designed and architected to make it a place where people come and have real dialogue and people talk face to face. Ping pong bars, where people are playing ping pong in person. So we are seeing the pendulum swing. People are absolutely saying, I can't live a fake life anymore. I'm alone. I feel disconnected, and I'm sick of it. And people don't know. Again, the average person doesn't know where it's coming from, but it's because one of our most basic human needs is not being met. Our need to belong to each other. We have that deep
to have a community.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. And I have to join you sometime, Christina, because you are so connected into everything that's going on. And I see you speaking at the different symposiums. And,
goodness.
you know, I do. I have to just join in with you sometime because
I would love it. I'll be really frank with you. You know, listen, Molly, this is part of my own self-care is that I know that staying connected, staying present, being in relationship with people is what keeps me mentally healthy.
Yeah.
So,
right.
You know, for me, it's not like, ooh, I get to do these things or it's like
you have to, I think that's, self-awareness.
Yeah, that's right.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Karen, okay, we have a question for you, Christina.
Sure.
Karen asks, what do you suggest for dealing with people with IDD who might have communication issues or who have no idea where to go? Great question, Karen.
Okay. So I think first of all, can we ask a clarifying question for Karen? And is this a family member? Or is that no?
No.
I just wonder. I'm just curious. I don't. Child.
I would assume if it's Karen, who I think it is, then I can say yes for this person. If it's a Karen, I think it is. Then,
okay.
I think the answer is yes.
Okay.
Oh, okay. No, she says general community. Excuse me. So I should not.
So for people who have IDD and they don't know where to go to help find connection for that. Is that the question?
So the question is, what do you suggest for dealing with people with IDD who might have communication issues? So communication issues or who don't know where to go.
Okay. So I don't have direct personal experience.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Brian, what was that?
Sure, with mental health issues.
Okay, so with mental health issues.
Got it. Okay, all right. So
in general.
Sure. So the number one thing is if we're talking about an adolescent here in the Richmond area, they can call the Children's Treatment Center down that's part of BC.
And IDD.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, so it's clarification for mental health and IDD issues.
Okay. All right. And is this someone in Virginia?
I think this is just in general.
Okay. So the first thing I know very directly here in Virginia, when we're talking about a young person, and it doesn't have to be under the age of 18, it can be up in the early 20s, but when it's a young person, calling the Virginia Treatment Center for Children, which is part of VCU, that gets you onto a hotline, if you will, that takes you to a patient advocate that can begin to navigate all of the various points of contact that may be helpful for that person. Mm-hmm. So that's one place that you can start. And it is a place that you absolutely can call and say, I don't even know what questions to ask. Let me tell you what's happening. And that advocate and that navigator can help begin to put together some of the pieces of the puzzle, if you will. There are other types of services in other areas. I don't know them personally. I do know in Texas, just because I'm from there, that Texas Children's Hospital has a similar network. Mm-hmm. But reaching out to a children's hospital that is known for having a very robust mental health or psychiatric division would be a great place to start, and trying to find some patient advocacy programs that are part of that community there. Okay. I also think anytime you can find a community, that shares some of the challenges, and like we said, social media has its downfalls, but Facebook and those places can be great places to find communities with people going through. My daughter recently had a PANDAS diagnosis, and, I've had great help and assistance through one of the local Facebook groups, PRAI, P-R-A-I.
Yes, I know them well.
That's,
Jessica,
so
Gavin,
those can
wonderful.
be, yes, so those can be great places when I absolutely came into that world going, I have no idea what this means, but I felt like it was giving me at least some answers to some stuff that was going on. And now that's been a great community where I can go ask questions and get help.
Yeah, I love Jessica. They actually were at our December event at the Children's Museum. So they
Oh,
were
cool.
there.
Okay.
I don't think Jessica was there that night, but they had some other people who LaDonna Branson.
Yes. Okay.
I
yeah,
they're
met
a
her,
wonderful,
actually.
wonderful group.
Yeah.
I connect with them often for like, advocacy stuff.
Right.
So,
And I mean, for Karen's sake, sometimes revealing a little bit about what you're going through is how you find those communities. I mean, I had to raise my hand and say, this is happening. And then somebody said, oh, go find these people. So that's also part of it sometimes.
Absolutely. Awesome. Good.
Yeah.
So Karen, I hope that was good information for you. So yes, wonderful. And hold on for just a second. Sorry, I'm sorry. Here you go.
Okay.
Sometimes you just get those blanks. I'm like, all right, awesome. Well, I did not know that about your daughter, Christina.
Yes, it's a new diagnosis that, quite frankly, it's like I said, we feel like it's giving us some answers to some behavioral things that have been happening that were really quite scary and puzzling for us. So that's a whole new world for us to be navigating. It does not appear that she has a very severe case, so I feel very blessed from that regard. But it's, I think every child is unique, and every journey with each child is going to have, it's ups and it's ups and downs, and so we're seeing a great team in the pediatric unit, and so we're on a good path.
That's wonderful. And it's wonderful that we live in a time where this can be diagnosed.
Right.
This is a new emerging, not that it's new because it's been there forever, but now we have a name for it.
Yeah.
And now
how funny, Molly, it just popped into my head, the fact that this is we're talking about mental health, and many children with PANDAS or PANS get misdiagnosed with psychiatric disorders because most of the symptoms are psychiatric in nature. Sure. And so even with Anna, I mean, she's not even 5 yet. And the diagnosis, we were looking at whether she was starting to develop an eating disorder, because one of the characteristics can be sudden onset of anorexia-like behaviors. And of course, with my background, this was a huge red flag, and that was her main symptom, and as well as anxiety. And so many children that have, might have this PANS or PANDAS, which is just related to the strep and or other bacterial, or even they think there could even be viral strains that are now causing it. And if you actually can get the diagnosis, then you have other treatment options. So it's actually something to keep in mind. If your child has immediate overnight onset of psychiatric, changes, go and talk to their doctor about something like PANS or PANDAS, because that can be, it's very, it's pretty rare, but it can be something to consider if it's something that's very dramatic and overnight. When you're talking about mental illness, typically in children, you start to see these behaviors over a period of time, and they begin to escalate, as opposed to something being immediate and dramatic.
Sure. Yeah. Well, keep us posted on this, Christina.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming if you're talking about on this show that you are open about this.
Yeah, we are. Yeah,
okay.
We are. I mean, I feel like we're pretty new into it, so I certainly don't feel like I can shed a whole lot of light on it yet, because we're still learning so much. But I'm definitely happy to talk. And especially, like I said, I mean, really, Molly, for about a year, we've been trying to figure out whether we were going to take her into a psychiatrist to start evaluating her for something like anxiety or an eating disorder. And it just seemed so utterly ridiculous at age 4.5 that would even be possible. And so it was my having, private conversations with people, actually at church, that someone said, I know a friend who has a daughter who this, and we made that connection, and she helped me get in to see a doctor, and the diagnosis confirmed it. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Again, your network, your mom network.
I know. No, it's absolutely true. Yeah.
Together there. That's, well, I'm glad that you have a grasp on it now, Christine.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you.
And I definitely want to stay on that journey with you.
Yes, absolutely, Molly. Well,
so
I know the very first conversation you and I had, I feel like we just clicked because we just share a common vision that, you know, we can make the world a better place by seeing each other and showing up for each other in such meaningful and authentic ways. And so I love the work you're doing, and I'm honored to be a friend and support you guys and all that you're doing. And thanks for having me on here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I loved having you on here, Christina. It was, it's so refreshing talking with you because you're so true to your word. You keep things honest, you keep things authentic, and it's just really wonderful to have you on here tonight. And it's been a breath of fresh air for me. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for helping me with a topic that I myself am not familiar with, in the sense that, like, it makes me nervous that I don't want to say something that, you know.
I totally get it. I know.
It's so ironic, but
well, it's interesting for you to see it from that perspective, you know. So,
yeah.
No,
So this worked out really wonderful tonight. That you were
thank
able
you
to help
so
us.
much. Well, I hope everybody in your house keeps getting better and that nobody else goes down.
We can't afford any more sickness around here.
Oh, ma'am. No.
I've been going around with the Lysol bottle, spraying everything down.
It's almost summer, for Pete's sake, right? Like, let's move on.
Exactly. Like, flu should be gone by now.
Oh, yes.
Gone.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Christina, we are going to do a little drawing here.
Okay. All right.
So we're going to need you to pick a number.
Okay.
All right, Brian, what are we doing?
1 and 15.
1 and 15, Christina.
Pick a number between 1 and 15?
Yes.
Okay. 9.
9. Okay.
My
Drum roll.
oldest child is 9 for a few more months. There you go.
All right. Our winner tonight is Karen Pruitt. Congratulations, Karen. You won Oscar the Only. So, Karen, if you could please email us your address or send it in a message, and we will get that information over to Christina, who will send the book on out to you.
That would be
Thank you
great.
for being part of this tonight, Karen. We appreciate you being on, being part of our show tonight. We want to thank you again, Christina, for being part of this. And again, thanks to all of the people who joined us tonight, whether it's just saying hi or asking a question or just listening. So thank you for being part of this topic tonight, this very important topic. And we look forward to seeing you next week for another Movement Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Project Just Like You. You can also check us out on YouTube as well. We do post it to YouTube. We encourage you to share and let your friends know what you're watching, and to just join us, because each week we have a new topic, we have a new person, and a new lively discussion. So thank you so much again.
Bye.
All right.